Welcome to the Lippis Report.
Hi everyone, it's Nick Lippis again, and I'm here with Brian Forbes from Voltaire, and we're testing the 6048, which is a top-of-rack 10 gigabit Ethernet switch here at iSimCity this week. Now I'm going to talk to Brian a little bit about the box, but before we do it, I just want to remind everyone, these are the hot boxes today in the marketplace. They're single chip designs, the first generation of single chip designs that we've seen in the marketplace that we're testing, so we're going to get some really good data on how they all perform, their latency, their power consumption, and so forth. Run rates for these things right now in the marketplace, depending upon company, is anywhere between $15 to like $20 million per quarter. So there is a huge appetite and demand for these products in the marketplace. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Brian. Tell us a little bit about what you do for Voltaire, and if you can just guide us through the 6048, that would be great.
Sure, thanks, Nick. My name is Brian Forbes. I'm the Director of Technical Alliances for Voltaire, located here on the West Coast. And I'm really happy to have a chance to do a little show and tell for the 6048. So just in a nutshell, we have a 1U chassis here, 48 ports, non-blocking 10 gigabit Ethernet or 1 gig Ethernet ports. We have two replaceable power supplies, hot plugged in the back. Single chip implementation, as Nick said, so we've got really excellent throughput, very good reliability, and also an extremely good price point. So what we're listing this box currently at is under $500 a port US list. So
yeah, very good.
You can imagine what discounts and for resellers and end users might expect. The other thing that we're proud of as far as the physical box is concerned is the very, very low power consumption. This is a 6.3 watts actual measured in situations. It's not a data sheet typo. And we do see, maybe we'll get into it, some customers where that's a very important thing for them going forward in some restricted data centers. This is a full layer 2 stack, including all of the data center Ethernet, DCB, bridging, and so forth. So as far as standards are concerned, there's almost none of the current standards that aren't implemented for L2, so it's a very complete box.
Okay.
And then one final attribute, which isn't really physical, is that although we have a list of certified SFP plus transceivers, you can basically buy your own if you already have an existing arrangement or you have a vendor that you prefer. You can buy those essentially at your vendor price, your street price. So we decoupled that, which is a huge change to the cost per port when you really add up the fact that you have to buy one for every port that you're going to deploy. So okay. I think the package is highly dense, very energy efficient, high performance, low cost, and a very good transceiver model, so you're not locked into a particular vendor's choice or price point.
Excellent, great, and we'll be able to verify all that, during this week at the test over here at iSimCity. Great. So we're going to talk a little bit about network design. Nick Lippis again, and I'm here with Brian Forbes from Voltaire. And we're going to talk about network design in the data center. And so during the whole series, we've been talking about how virtualization has really impacted the design of data centers and especially has driven some fundamental change requirements in the networking side of things. In particular, as we all know, when we move VMs from physical server to physical server, that drives a whole bunch of reconfiguration changes that are done manually. It's very complex and nasty problem. So a lot of companies are looking for ways in which to solve that for the marketplace. So we mentioned the Voltaire, the 6048, which is the top-of-rack switch, the 48-port switch, and also they have a core switch, the 8500, which we're not testing this week, but perhaps sometime in the future. But together, along with some software they called UFM, create a system or a fabric for data centers. And so, Brian, how is Voltaire addressing both the virtualization changes in the marketplace and also to the converged I/O opportunities that are out there right now?
Well, from the virtualization standpoint, one of the things that you kind of becomes immediately obvious is that now we have a whole gamut of different types of switches that are in that environment, from the virtual switches, which have to be administered and so forth, to the physical switches, to the top of rack or whatever the architecture model. And because the VM workload is so dynamic, you really don't know, or nor do you really want to care about whether the VM has to be located here in the data center or the other end of the data center. So based on our experience with InfiniBand and doing some InfiniBand-based data centers where they had this really highly flexible model where they could essentially put resources wherever they needed storage on one side and the VMs using it on another. We believe that the right way to do a lot of data centers is to replicate that model with a two-tier layer 2 flat network, go for high scale out, make sure there's plenty of bandwidth, non-blocking or low blocking factor, low latency, so again, you're not worried about, is this application going to be latency sensitive, so I have to worry about where I put it. And then you want to orchestrate the whole thing so that you, even those two tiers, which is a simpler model than today, of course, you want to orchestrate it as though it's one big service that's being delivered to the VMs. Hence the term that we've used for many years now is fabric rather than network, implying that you're doing more than just connecting a bunch of boxes together. So, so the UFM product is essentially, you might consider it a network operating system, although that's something a little overstating, but it's essentially a management engine that can integrate the provisioning and monitoring of all of those pieces, logical switch, physical switches at the edge, physical core switches, and essentially orchestrate the provisioning of those dynamically without any network manager intervention.
So UFM is software, software product, and it runs on, doesn't matter, like an Intel-based platform?
It runs on any x86, several flavors of Linux, and essentially runs essentially like an appliance at the edge of the network. You have two for high availability. And it goes out and essentially discovers all of the physical resources, switches, virtual switches, the VMs themselves. And then if you can tell us through your orchestrator or your job launcher which VMs are associated with which applications, we can also then report that, hey, this application is being affected by this congestion. So rather than tell you that we've got one port that's congested, we can say, by the way, that affects application A, B, and C, but isn't affecting the SLA. So if you step back, what UFM really allows you to do is essentially orchestrate quality of service, bandwidth provisioning, VLANing, isolation, end-to-end, and then essentially change that dynamically, automatically as the VM moves. So we detect the fact that the VM is going to be relocated, do a clean shutdown, and we set up the network. So by the time the VM's up, the network has been reconfigured, and there's been no human intervention.
Great, excellent. So we're basically talking about a two-tier architecture, a layer 2 architecture where you can kind of move things around without the need for a lot of reconfiguration. And then you have UFM that is essentially a provisioning proxy. It has a discovery protocol element within it, so it can discover both networking elements, storage elements, VMs, applications, and it also enables change management as things move around, and also can provide some insight into troubleshooting and optimization of the fabric as well. Is that kind of
exactly?
Is that
so we give you not only deep monitoring, depending upon the switches that are deployed, down to the flow level, down to the stream level, and also a really high level abstraction that says, overall your fabric is congested at the edge, or is congested over here, or there's many to one application contention for this port. So we can bring it up all the way to the application level if the environment will basically just tell us which applications are being met.
Great, excellent. And actually, I do have one last question, and it has to do with converged I/O. So, so in the InfiniBand marketplace, they're probably a little bit further along in that a smaller market, but also like for very demanding environments, high performance computing environments. But also is that they had more experience, I think, with storage over InfiniBand than we have with storage over Ethernet.
True.
And so you're bringing that into, I think that's a kind of a value add and an expertise that Voltaire kind of brings into the Ethernet world. So what are you doing in both the 8500 and the 6048 to enable storage enablement?
So at this point, the key things are to have the kind of the basics to build a lossless fabric that has like FIP snooping, so you can actually measure the traffic rather than just push it through as packets. So you want to build a priority scheme so that you can get the storage through with the decent latency, make sure you don't drop the packets, be able to monitor to see how it is performing, and be able to set things like quality of service and rate limiting and policing to make sure that your storage traffic gets the proper attention from the fabric compared to all the other traffic that's competing with. So at the moment we're doing that both at the leaf 6048 has a full set of L2 support for FCOE, and on the core as well, although the core typically is more transparent. As far as terminating the FCOE session and actually having fiber channel ports, I can't comment on the future plans. It's not announced. But,
Okay, great, excellent. And Voltaire was recently acquired by Molinox.
Yes.
So you're a much bigger, company
Yes.
right now, both in the InfiniBand marketplace and then
Exactly.
also in the Ethernet space as well.
Exactly. And
So-
so we look forward to combining the two skill sets.
Excellent, great. Brian, thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
That concludes this edition of the Lippis Report. Thank you for joining us. Look for us every Tuesday and Thursday. To get your free subscription to the Lippis Report newsletter, go to www.lippis.com.